Hi, Celia Smith. So you're the regional director of the WSPA Canada. Can you tell me about what Canada functions?
Okay. The Canadian Office of the World Society for the Protection of Animals has been around since the early 1980s, and we have more than 30,000 supporters across Canada. We are one of 12 WSPA offices around the world, and one of the things that we've noticed is that there are more than 1 million Canadians of Chinese ethnic origin, and we thought it was time that we could reach out to that large and growing and influential community and bring to them our message of kindness and compassion for animals.
So how important is that message to the every community to Chinese, for example?
Well, it's important for all Canadians, but we feel that there are a number of issues that are going on in China now, and China is becoming more and more integrated with the world. And so there are a few practices in China, like there are in many parts of the world, that don't take animal welfare into consideration. And so we would like to start dialogues with the communities here in Canada and let them know how we would like to see animals treated.
But how you say there may be some practice in China, they are not very adhere to the standard of WSPA, but we're talking only to the community here, how they affect, influence the
Well, I think that people living here, I'm of Italian origin, and certainly I have ties to my family in Italy, and a lot of the practices that I still do here in Canada are similar to things that used to go on in Italy, and I'm sure with the Chinese community it is the same. As first generation, second generation, you still have ties to China. The way you treat others, the way your cultural habits are linked to your homeland, and so therefore it's important to start opening dialogue with different communities. We have to start somewhere, and certainly having an office here in Canada, and there's so many Chinese people here in Canada, it's very important to reach out to them, and they can start talking to their family, and they can also change the practices here in Canada.
Okay. So how long have the Canada division been established?
We were established in the early 1980s. The office opened in 1982. So we've been around for quite some time. We only have the one office here in Toronto.
Okay. So any outstanding achievement for the past many years for the Canadian division?
I think some of the things that we've been very instrumental in is trying to improve legislation for captive animals in zoos and trying to improve the welfare of zoos. Most people think of things like Metro Toronto Zoo, which is a well-established facility, but there are zoos in other communities that are not
up to the standard.
Not up to the same standards. Yes, that's correct. We've also just piloted a very exciting project in northern Native communities. They don't have access to veterinarians or dog control officers or anything like that, so they must resort to shooting dogs in order to control the numbers. And what we're trying to do is introduce a more humane way of doing that, bringing in veterinarians to do sterilizations, establishing dog control officers and things like that. So those are a few things that we've done.
Yeah, I think all the programs need money. What's the finance for that WSPA?
In Canada, our income is about $1.8 million. And yes, programs are very expensive. We also fund some of the work that is done internationally from Canada. So we often have work going on in developing countries or countries where they just don't have the funds to do it. And so we will collect money from Canadian donors and move it to those other countries.
I see. So all the funding are by donations?
Yes, we receive no government funding, so it is all through public donations, the generosity of people.
Okay, so it's just a charitable organization, is that right?
Absolutely, we're a registered charity here in Canada.
Okay. But I look at that, there's a 12 division across the world, but that seems that's nothing in Asia.
Not at this moment, but we are opening an office in Bangkok, and that should happen within the next 3 months. and that will be our first office that will be opened in Asia. One of the things that WSPA does, though, is we work with what we call member organizations, and these are groups, smaller groups in different countries who are trying to promote animal welfare. There's actually 3 member societies in China right now that we are working with.
Okay. So is that a very severe situation for protection of animals in the world? Or?
Well, there's a number of issues that are involved. I mean, if we can work better with animals, in many cases, for example, farming practices, as we see when we have intensive farming that isn't good for animal welfare, there are certain diseases that come out of this. We've got avian flu as an example of this. The whole mad cow disease came up through the whole agricultural system. If we can introduce more animal-friendly types of farming, then we can also eliminate the human hazards and the human issues that evolve from that. Also, just in many cases, we found that relationships with animals, with pets and things like that, are helpful to people. There are so many people around the world that rely on animals for, in many countries they still use donkeys and horses to transport their goods and people, so that we really have to work towards making animals something that we're working with in a very symbiotic relationship, and not just that they are our tools. So that's what we try to promote.
Any major obstacles or barriers for your promoting this kind of standard?
Well, of course, a lot of people have traditions and cultures in which animals have been mistreated for many, many years. And so you have to start to change attitudes, and you have to start to have people understand that animals are sentient beings and they do feel pain. And so it's a real education process, because a lot of people say, well, it's been done this way for centuries. And so we're trying to change that.
Just take for granted, right? So, yeah. But were any major campaigns or events coming in within a year?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one big thing that we're doing in Canada, and one of the reasons for the outreach into the Chinese community, is that there are bear farms in China in which animals are confined in very small cages for their entire lives to be milked for bile. We've started, and we're trying to dialogue with the Chinese government. Of course, it's not very easy for us, and we strongly believe that it's not so much, it's hard for Westerners shouldn't be telling other people how to do things. So really, we would like the people in China to start to understand the issues and promote change themselves. Animal welfare is at a very low level in China, so it's hard for us to begin to do that. And we think that by reaching out to Chinese communities in Canada, the US, the United Kingdom, Australia, we can start to bring forward the messaging and have people understand some of the issues here and why we think that bear farms are cruel towards animals, and how they can be improved or eliminated altogether.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Hi, Patrick. I know you're the campaigns and communication manager for WSPA Canada. Can you tell me about your job specs or what's?
I'm campaigns and communications manager for the World Society for Protection of Animals. I have responsibility for conducting a number of campaigns in Canada, including Bear Safe, which is our campaign to help prevent nuisance and unwanted bear encounters at people's home, cottage, campsite. And the idea is to help to save bears' lives by educating people how to properly dispose of their food and garbage, so they don't end up having bear problems in the first place. And in that way, you don't end up with bears being shot unnecessarily just because they've wandered onto somebody's porch or torn up through somebody's garbage. Also our Keep Whales Wild campaign, which is aimed at addressing the Canadian government and encouraging them to end the captivity and the keeping of whales in captivity for aquariums and dolphin parks. We also are looking at bringing standards provincially for zoos in Canada, so that all zoos must be required to operate at a professional standard, and to close the worst roadside zoos, because there's some pretty appalling zoos in Canada which compare unfavorably to many parts of the developing world, including Africa and Southeast Asia. We've got zoos in Canada which are just as bad. We're campaigning with a number of other animal welfare groups to stop the Canadian commercial seal hunt, which is another campaign we're working on. And there's a whole variety of campaigns, and I also contribute to our international campaigns, such as our campaigns to stop the commercial killing of whales, stop the whale hunt, and also and more relevant to the Chinese-Canadian community and the Chinese community at large, we are working to stop bear farming in China, which is absolutely a horribly cruel practice. We do a lot of captivity issues, everything from zoos to circuses, and everything in between. And there is no crueler form of captive confinement of an animal than bear farming.
The list seems to keep going on, right? So how can you do all these things with very limited resources?
Well, we do our best. We're a very active organization. We work really hard. We roll up our sleeves, and we work with our member societies. One of the strengths of WSPA is that we're not just an organization with 12 offices. We actually have member societies, more than 400 of them, in more than 100 countries around the world. And in many cases, it's the member societies that are doing the work on the ground and doing the campaigning on our behalf. And we try to motivate our Canadian member societies to plug into our campaigns as well.
So the one you mentioned is the international campaigning or just the Canadian campaigning?
Well, in Canada, for instance, on the zoo campaign, we work with Zoo Check Canada, which is another organization that looks at captivity issues. We work with the Ontario SPCA. We also work with the Canadian Federation of Humane Societies. These are all member societies, Voice for Animals out in Edmonton. And we also work with non-member societies, other animal protection groups. I mentioned the Coalition to End the Commercial Seal Hunt, which consists of hundreds of organizations around the world, all working in partnership to bring that horrible practice of killing seals for their fur to an end.
So what's the time frame for those campaigns, and then how you measure the result?
Well, I guess we measure the results by success, by victory. We're looking, and sometimes the victories are slow in coming, but we, as our Director General will tell you, WSPA is intent on our goals. We are working towards one day achieving a universal declaration for animal welfare along the lines of the Universal Declaration for the Rights of the Child, or the Universal Declaration to ban landmines, and similar international treaties. We want an international treaty that's accepted by all or most of the nations of the world on animal welfare, that puts a priority on protecting animals and preventing cruelty to animals. And we think that this is achievable, and we furthermore would like to see it achieved within our lifetimes. We know it's probably a long haul. It may take 10 years or more, but we would like to see this happen. And same with banning the Canadian seal hunt. As you know, groups have been campaigning against it for years, but there's sort of a new energy at play now, because we have hit upon this idea of boycotting Canadian seafood. Canadian seafood is a much more important market to Canada internationally than the trade in seal fur. And a lot more people are employed in the fishery than are employed in the seal hunt. So we're hoping that if enough people can join in the boycott and stop eating Canadian seafood and only eat seafood from other countries, that eventually we're going to see the government put an end to the commercial seal hunt once and for all.
But you mentioned that it involves setting up the new international treaty or the legislation in certain countries that involve a lot of lobbying.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of lobbying. WSPA was working with a group in Taiwan called EAST, animal protection group, on lobbying for legislation, and Taiwan just a few years ago passed their very first animal protection laws, and WSPA is proud to have been part of that process. It was partly a campaign that we've been conducting to expose the cruel treatment of dogs in the pounds, basically dumps. There were these junkyards where they were just throwing all the abandoned animals, and they were kept in wretched cages that were piled on top of each other and filthy with excrement, and they were also thrown down in one case, in one particular junkyard pound, thrown down into a pit and just left to die, and it was just a horrible situation. But through lobbying, through pressure, we were able to bring about an end to that, and the government was very responsive, and they actually built modern shelters along the lines of what you would see here in Canada, and got rid of all the worst of these pounds, and passed very progressive animal protection laws shortly thereafter. So progress is sometimes slow in coming, and sometimes it's very quick. In the case of Taiwan, they were very responsive. It was within a very few short years we saw a complete turnaround with the treatment of stray dogs in that country.
So I know that the WSPA has like 12 regional cities, right, or regional division. So how Canada rated compared with the other 11s in terms of like campaign execution?
Yeah, well, we have an active campaigns department here in Canada, as we do in the United States, the Netherlands, the Australian office has a campaigns team there. So in terms of
performance
all of the offices are active, to a certain extent, but the Canadian office is probably in the upper echelons in terms of, we're very active at the moment in terms of our Canadian campaigns, and also working in concert with the other offices and with the member societies on the international campaigns.
So what kind of support you want from every community, like Chinese community?
Well, we're really looking to the Chinese community. First of all, we want to extend a hand to them and let them know about WSPA, because we could use the support for animal welfare generally. In Canada, as I mentioned, there's a number of important issues like the Canadian commercial seal hunt. We would want people to participate in that boycott of Canadian seafood. We also are looking for support to get people to talk to the Canadian Senate, to get them to move forward on the long-promised animal cruelty legislation, the revisions to the Canada's criminal code. We need people telling their members of parliament and telling the Canadian senators that that's a very important issue to them, is bringing in stronger animal protection laws. And with regard to our campaign to stop the cruel treatment of bears in the bear farms in China, we would hope that when we get our petitions going a little bit later this year, that the Chinese community, when they see us at events in the fall, we're going to be doing a number of events around the time of the Moon Festival, and also during World Animal Week, which is in October. So in September and October, we'll be out in Toronto's Chinese community, and perhaps in the Chinese community in some other Canadian cities, and we'll be collecting petition signatures to stop bear farming in China, and we hope people will support that initiative.
Thank you. Hi, Major General Peter Davis. Can you tell me about WSPA?
Yes, absolutely. That stands for the World Society for the Protection of Animals. We are the largest federation of animal welfare groups in the world. I currently have some 560 member societies in 126 countries, and that number is growing all the time. I have offices in 12 countries at the moment around the world, including this one I'm sitting in at the moment in Canada. And we have a new office going to be opening in Bangkok to cover Asia later on this year, so that will make 13. We have been around for quite a long time now, and we have been concentrating essentially up till now on raising money in what you might call the first world, hence the office here in Canada, and spending it in the emerging countries, largely in South America, Africa and Asia. But increasingly in the last couple of years, since I became the Director General, we're acting very much more as this global federation and harnessing the power of our member societies throughout the world on some specific issues. Clearly part of our job is to pass on the experience that we've gained in the Western world on animal welfare to emerging countries, to encourage them to start working on animal welfare issues in their own country, and then to advise and assist them on how to progress, sometimes giving money, but more often doing joint projects with them.
So I know that WSPA is headquartered in London, in England.
Yes, it's in London.
Yeah.
It used to be split between London and Boston, USA, but we've now concentrated it in the one place.
So what's the relationship between WSPA and UN?
We've been affiliated to the United Nations. We are a recognized non-governmental organization there, and we have been authorized to use the UN badge on our correspondence and other work that we produce. It's not only the UN in New York, but it's also with the subsidiary organizations of the United Nations. We have contacts around the world. We are involved with the World Health Organization, for example, and have done projects with them. We are closely linked to the OIE, the Organization for Animal Health in Paris, and I personally go and meet the Director General of the World Trade Organization every year.
Okay, we know that we have a tsunami disaster last year. What kind of work have this organization done?
WSPA has been involved in disaster relief around the world for a very long time. In recent years, we were in Montserrat when the volcano erupted. We were invited by the government to go and advise and assist and actually rescue animals there from the volcanic ash. We were in Iraq immediately after the end of the formal war that took place to help re-establish the veterinary organizations there, because the farm animals in particular were suffering, and we wanted to get them back to work so that the peasants on the land could start producing food again. And when tsunami came, we had established ourselves as the global coordinator for disaster relief in animal welfare terms, and our member societies and supporting organizations around the world gave us time to go in and do formal assessments in each of the 4 countries affected. That was India, Sri Lanka, Thailand and Indonesia, and then inform them what help was needed. They then gave us the wherewithal to do emergency animal welfare relief in those 4 countries, and then WSPA, through its offices in Canada and Australia and the United Kingdom, went to its loyal membership and supporter groups and said, now would you like to contribute to the work we're going to go on with? Because WSPA not only wanted to do emergency relief there, we wanted to get those countries back on their feet in terms of infrastructure for animal welfare, and their veterinary work that was done. For example, in Indonesia, a complete veterinary school with all its students were wiped out. They just disappeared and there were no vets left. And so we raised something like $1 million in the Western world, and every penny of that money has and is being spent in those 4 countries.
Yeah, WSPA is an international organization, right? And then you're running an international campaign. Any major barrier, obstacles?
No major obstacles, but there are certainly many things that we'd like to achieve. For example, we have 2 major strategic issues going on at the moment. The first has been going on for about 5 years, and that is a draft declaration for animal welfare, which one day we hope the United Nations will adopt and be similar to the Bill of Human Rights in the United Nations. The animal welfare groups of the world, under WSPA's coordination, brought together a document which we then handed over to governments, because it is governments who have to make these decisions. And as a result of that, in 2003, the Philippine government hosted a conference in Manila, which 22 countries came to, and signed up to the principles of why there needed to be a bill for animal welfare. At the end of this year, a core group of 5 countries will meet in Argentina under the Argentinian government's control to take that forward, with the hope that in 2006 there will be a global ministerial conference to agree something which will be probably quite simple, but which will establish animal welfare as a key issue in legislation, realizing and acknowledging that animals are sentient, that is, they feel pain and can suffer, and you can't treat them like a bag of nails or a box of bricks or anything else. So all the rules will flow from that. The other one, which we've been working on very hard, is the International Whaling Commission's work. I've just come back from South Korea, where this year's IWC took place. And there we have managed, by working together with other member societies of WSPA, to prevent the Japanese group, that's the Japanese, the Norwegians and the Icelandics, from increasing their quota for so-called scientific whaling in the Antarctic. No more whales will be killed next year than there were this year, but it was the aim of those countries to double the number. And by working extremely hard behind the scenes and in preparation for that meeting, this will not happen. We did this by gathering key people from member societies to form a core group to research the animal welfare issues of whaling. We produced a report called Troubled Waters, which is the most advanced scientific review of killing methods, and it comes absolutely down to the conclusion that there is no humane way of killing whales at sea. And that report, which was given a forward by Sir David Attenborough, the internationally well-known wildlife expert, went to every whaling commissioner, every government, every member society of WSPA around the world. And just before the IWC met, we invited our member societies around the world to lobby their own governments, so that Koreans lobbied Korean governments, Australians, Australian governments, etc. And this proved highly successful. We managed to prevent the Japanese bloc from increasing killing whales. We got animal welfare firmly back on the agenda, and for the next IWC meeting next year, there will be a 3-day workshop on the killing methods involved in killing whales. And that is a major step forward. We have made these countries accept that the methods of killing whales are subjects which ought to be debated. And we produced a film just before the South Korean meeting of taken by us and the Environmental Investigation Agency of a Norwegian whaler killing a whale. The Norwegians having claimed that all their whales, or the majority of them, were killed instantaneously. This film, which is very dramatic, sees the whale taking 14 plus minutes to die after the harpoon had initially exploded inside its skull.
I know that WSPA has no office in Asia. Will there be one in the future?
Yes, I'm glad to say there will be. We've been covering Asia from Australia, and it's a long way away, as you'll appreciate. We did a survey of which country we should place our Asian office, and for a variety of reasons, from our business plan and our political explorations, we have decided that we will open our office in Bangkok, and that will open in October, November this year.
Okay. What kind of support or appeal to support from the world people or from the Chinese community?
I've been very pleased coming here to Toronto that there has been an interest from the media which supports the 1 million Canadian Chinese who are here about what we're doing. This sort of connection with the Chinese community has been taking place in other places too, like Australia and my own country, the United Kingdom, over the recent years, and we really welcome this. There is so much that needs to be done in China to improve matters. I think, to be fair, the Chinese have a history of being a compassionate country, a very enlightened country, a huge tradition of intellectual ability, etc. But animal welfare somehow seems to have got left behind. And what we want to do is, with the help of Chinese people everywhere, is persuade the governments of China to take steps towards improving things. There are some very terrible things going on in China through traditional methods, ignorance, and all of that. It's not sadistic work. It's because of ignorance. And we want to help the Chinese educate their own people as to why these practices are not good for them, morally, ethically, and also many of these practices have human health connections, which I think a responsible government would want to avoid. I'm thinking particularly of things like avian flu, which is worrying everybody at the moment, where the conditions under which chickens and ducks are being kept in particular are leading to the outbreaks of this avian flu, which is claimed is going to transfer into the human strain. And for those reasons alone, it's a very good thing that animal welfare is brought into play.
Okay, thank you, Major General Peter Davis.
Thank you.